Mr. Cart was silent on his way back to the ship. No doubt the shuttle provided to him by High Hegemon Baikal Dowd was filled to the brim with surveillance equipment, and he decided that he won't give Dowd satisfaction of hearing his inner thoughts. But he certainly had many of them. This entire meeting with the Hegemon went wildly different than he expected, but in a way he did accomplish what he came here to do. Dowd would not interfere with plans of Galatian Academy Provost to reactivate the gate network. That was good, but what then, Mr. Cart thought. Then he would probably find himself on every wanted poster board in the sector, probably to be captured alive so that Hegemon could have his own researchers dissect him, or perhaps brainwash him into joining his fellow brothers. That was the other thing. Dowd knew what Mr. Cart was. He expected that Anahita Bert told Hegemon some things, but he knew things even Provost shouldn't know, which meant that, somewhere out there were his fellow pilot clones, only ones he could maybe connect to, relics of a domain era now lost and forgotten. Except, of course, it wasn't entirely forgotten. Dowd clearly knew what domain really was, and Mr. Cart suspected that he wasn't the first Hegemon to possess that knowledge. Still, he wondered if he shouldn't at least try to contact his fellow pilots, to maybe try and explain to them that they're being used just like they were back home. But the moment he thought that, he realized it was probably exactly what the Hegemon wanted him to do. No, he would have to leave his brothers to themselves, and hope that one day, maybe, they will understand the idea of freedom. He was still deep in thought when he came back to CLS Second Chance through his private airlock, but as he entered his cabin, something struck him. Varuna wasn't there, that was first unusual thing. But then he looked at the cameras that showed interiors of various ships and noticed that they were a lot more empty. He flicked through several feeds and saw some of the crewmates limping around, bandaged and battered up. He switched the view to his own bridge and saw Brother Jesselton lying on the ground, his nose broken and bleeding profusely all over the floor. Zala and Disco were next to him, and Zala seemed to have some bruises of her own as well as a bandage already soaked through with blood on her leg. He opened the comm to ask what was going on, but in that very moment the doors opened and Varuna limped in. "You're back, finally," she said, and Mr. Carter noticed that she was bruised too, and seemingly missing some of her teeth. "Thought Dowd locked you up." "He didn't. But never mind me, what happened to you?" He pointed to the screens. "What the hell happened to everyone?"
We had a hegemony agent in the fleet, boss. We dropped the ball, all of us. The moment you left, he sent a broadcast to all the clones we found, both soldiers and colonizers, and told them to disembark the fleet. He must have hacked into our comms and learned those controls phases you used."
"Not necessarily," Mr. Cart said, trying to sound calm, but in his mind he was terrified. Dowd knew he could have commanded the clones to disobey his agent, so he told him to act while he was away. It turns out that the Hegemony leadership knows a lot more about Old Domain than they let on. Hell, Dowd told me he has other pilot clones working for him. He probably knew how to command these clone soldiers all along. But what the hell did they do to you?
When we realized what was going on, we tried to stop them, but the soldier clones just beat down anyone who stood in their way. Didn't shoot anyone, but you know how strong they were. They just clubbed everyone who tried to stop them with their rifles."
She pointed to her face and her missing teeth.
"Except for Zala. One of them shot her in the leg and she didn't even try to stop him. Disco barely managed to patch her up, and she probably won't be able to walk again. But never mind that, boss. The clones only left 10 or so minutes ago. They must still be on the station. They took us by surprise, but now that you're here, maybe we could try and get them back."
"No. I feel like this is precisely what Dowd wants. Goad us into doing something stupid. I know I always said we don't leave our employees behind, but if we try to rescue them, we're all going to probably die or get arrested. Dowd was ready for this meeting, I can see that now. He knew exactly what to do and when. But wait, who the hell even was that rat? I saw Zala, Disco and Jesselton on the screens, but I didn't see House anywhere."
"What? No, he's on his ship getting everyone back in line after that mess. But it wasn't some outside or random agent either. It was Ludwig."
Mr. Cart felt as if reality just did a backflip. He needed a second to process what he just heard. Ludwig? He finally asked with disbelief. But here's what, Herr Captain, Ludwig's voice said over the comm. His round face appeared on one of the screens, for the first time with a small smile on it. He also ditched his Tritachyon employee suit in favor of Hegemony's military uniform. It looked so bizarrely on him that for a while everyone just thought it was some poor quality live video edit. So, what did you want to say, Captain? Herr Ludwig is what, a sad, grey-faced corp drone, unable to think outside of company guidelines? Or an unlikable, forgettable, naive fool who would cut off his own arm and leg for the benefit of the company? I mean, he flies a ship called CLS Harmless, for Star's sake. How could such a little, pudgy corpse'd be a mole? Did I miss anything? Well, judging by your silence, I'd say that I've been playing my role quite well for these past few years. Probably missed my calling in the cinema, didn't I? But you had your credentials, Mr. Cart finally blurted out. The machines, they recognized you as a Tritachyon employee. That sad, poor drone you known as Ludwig, that was me about 2 decades ago, before Hegemony Intelligence approached me and showed me how I've been wasting my life. It took a lot of bribes and at least 7 assassinations to preserve all my biometrics in Tritachyon systems, but that made me a good asset in the end. A good patriot, as High Hegemon would say. But you've been with us from the start. I remember you. You joined when we still had just 2 or 3 ships to our name. Why didn't you just sell us out before that? Because this assignment turned out a bit more complicated than it seemed at first. Initially, Captain, I was simply on the lookout for your adorable assistant, Miss Europa. She was an asset during her time in service of Hegemony Navy, and they sent me out to find out if Tritachyon didn't poach her again. Sure, she first worked as a freelance pilot, but then something changed and she started flying with the crowd again. Your first company, that is. I actually tried to join your previous operation, back before things went wrong after your salvage deal with Callisto Ibrahim, and then, for a while, I lost you, thinking that you were dead. But you were not, so I followed the rumors and security footages, found Miss Europa again, and joined with her. And then I learned about you, and things became so much more complicated. You flew with interesting people, for a start, House, Zala, and Dr. Andrada chief among them. You knew things you shouldn't know, and then things started being weird with that machine. You knew about Midnight, Mr. Cart said, trying to stay calm. He knew Ludwig was out of his reach, so at least he wouldn't give him the satisfaction of making him angry. How? She kept herself in secret. Only few people knew about her. Yes. Unfortunately, Captain, while you and Lieutenant Verona are good at keeping secrets, not everyone is. My dear mentor, the man who showed me the ropes of being a spacer, our dear old Captain House, he might have spilled something here and there after a few drinks. House, who Ludwig contacted over the comm as well, just stared at the floor, and in the silence that followed, everyone could hear whirring and clicking of his ramshackle life support machinery. He stayed motionless for a moment, but then just shrugged and turned to Mr. Cart. Yeah, I probably fucked up for a few deep ones. Don't even remember mentioning anything, but it might just be because I was too plastered. Nothing to defend myself with, Captain. I'll toss myself out the airlock if that's what you think is right. No one is tossing anyone out of anywhere, Mr. Cart said. He would probably make an exception for Ludwig, though. You might have blurted something out, sure, but it's that fat fuck there who ran with that knowledge straight to the Admiralty. Do you even know who you killed? Yes, an existential threat to the entire humanity, Herr Captain. You could have argued with me before about coexistence with AIs, but after we saw that thing in that dark system, I knew I did the right thing. You saw what a true unshackled AI would become, a monster that we could not hope to understand or stop, so I do not care what your connection to this midnight entity was. You were about to create another one of those monsters, and maybe even with good intentions, but you had to be stopped. Under his helmet, Mr. Cart opened his mouth to say something, but instead stayed silent, as thoughts rattled in his brain. After all, he had doubts about Midnight as well, all the way to her final moments. "Your silence? Good," Ludwig continued. "I was afraid you'd start talking some nonsense about hoping and chances. Yes, Herr Cart, there was a slight chance that this Midnight entity would not be dangerous. She could have even turned out useful, but if she turned out to be a threat, then she could have destroyed everything Hegemony worked for since the collapse. In a good time, I would have taken your gamble, but these are not good times. Oh, but do not be too cross with Captain House. He didn't openly say anything, just a few words too much in a wrong moment, enough to tip me off something was wrong. The rest, well, the rest kind of resolved itself when you used this AI to hack Hegemony relays. But still, as much as he might deserve it for his previous crimes, do not toss Captain House out of the airlock. I found him an oddly charming companion to have around." "No one is getting punished," Mr. Cart said, his calm mask falling apart. "Except for you, if I ever get my hands on you." "Ah, and there it is, that thing that impressed even the High Hegemon, that so rare these days quality of having some integrity as a leader. I'll be honest, you surprised me quite often, Herr Captain. When you said you don't leave your employees behind, you meant it. And other times you helped out too. From the day we started flying together, I counted 17 times when you responded to distress calls. Every single time they appeared. You flew headfirst into pirate ambushes, admittedly, knowing that they cannot spot you, but still, because someone could need help. And when someone needed help, you never demanded payment from them. I admit, it surprised me more than anything else, so much that to this day I don't know exactly what to make of you. Then again, I guess you don't know what to make of yourself either, because you may help strangers one day, but another you're going to smuggle weapons to terrorists or drugs to criminals without batting an eye. I don't even want to think how many people were indirectly killed or otherwise harmed by your actions, though, thanks to my contributions, we managed to shut down a lot of your business partners." Mr. Cart was silent again, because once again Ludwig was right. He knew his actions had consequences. Sure, he could argue that it was damn near impossible to make a living as a legal trader in Persian sector, but that was just an excuse. "Well, be proud then. But do you think that gives you the right to take away and enslave all the clones we found out there? You no doubt will not treat them like people and will just send them somewhere into meat grinder." "Perhaps," Ludwig said, looking thoughtfully. Then he shook his head. "But it is not my place to question Hegemon's orders. But I can say for sure that they will do more good working for us than flying with you. And besides, it did not have to happen. Mr. Dowd gave you a choice. He asked you to hand over either our good doctor or the Ludwig sister. You refused, so a compensation had to be made." "So much for Dowd's generosity," Mr. Cart said with venom, but Ludwig just laughed it off. "You think him a vile man, but originally Mr. Dowd's plan also involved using the clones to extract Dr. Andrada and Sister Zala from the fleet, since he expected you would prove uncooperative on the matter. But apparently High Hegemon considers you a man of integrity, and he always found such quality to be respectable, so he decided to refrain me from performing such actions, though he did decide that Sister Zala had to face at least some justice for her crimes, which is why she got shot. But I must warn you, Cart Logistics Fleet ID will soon be transferred to every single Hegemony fleet, as well as our allies in the Ludwig Church, though we will refrain from doing so at least until you work with the Academy. But since Tritakian Corporation and Syndian Dictat are looking for you as well, I'm afraid that you will have to stay on your toes from now on. I wish you luck, Captain. Please pass on my respects to Captain House as well. He taught me a lot during our travels." And then Ludwig cut the comm, and as soon as he did, Varuna and Mr. Cart ran a sweep of every system to find the back door that allowed him to contact them. They found it, scrubbed it clean, and then, with haste, left Chickamaustock Station, their departure flanked by a dozen of cruisers, yet another unspoken message sent by Michael Dowd. The company then set course back for Galatian Academy, but the journey was quiet. Disco took a break from patching up the cruise at one point to personally thank Mr. Cart for not handing him over to the Hegemon, and so did Zala. House, on the other hand, called the boss a few times with apologies, which must have been a serious blow to his image as a vicious, murderous pirate. He did all he could to protect his own family, but he wasn't able to do the same when it came to midnight. And while Mr. Cart felt that he should be angry at him, he just didn't see the point. What happened, happened. House made a blunder, and he understood blurting out something after a few drinks was precisely the kind of blunder House would make. That Midnight Dissonant was dead, and no amount of anger could bring her back, so he just told House to cut back on the drinks and everyone got back to work. And they didn't have to wait for said work this time, because as soon as they got in comrade of Galatian Academy, the provost called them immediately.
"Great timing, Mr. Cart," she said without any greetings. "Corres and her team made a breakthrough. I have another urgent assignment for you."
"Sure, but don't you want to know how talks with Dowd went?"
"His people called me already. I know he won't interfere with the project as long as Hegemony gets the exclusive rights to use it. I can agree to that, if it means we'll be able to bring the sector together."
"Yes, I'm sure that this will not lead to any conflicts with other factions. But did they also tell you that his agent raided our fleet while I was negotiating with him? Did they mention that they kidnapped all of the domain clones we found out there, and are probably dissecting or turning them into obedient slave soldiers right as we speak?" Anahita stared at him as if she just noticed he was there. She lit a cigarette, and the ashtray on her desk was full of them already, and puffed out a cloud of smoke, forcing Mr. Cart to wait.
"They did not," she finally replied. "And even if they did, I would not care, Mr. Cart. If Michael Dowd has somehow offended you or your feelings, feel free to take it up with him after we are done with our project. I will not tolerate further distractions or delays. It's enough that Corres and Gargle are insufferable. You are a mercenary, so at least you should have some professional decency and not bother me with issues unrelated to the project, understood?"
The boss felt like he should cut the comm right now, but knew that, aside from very brief satisfaction of reminding Anahita she was not his boss, such gesture wouldn't accomplish anything. Instead, he just stayed quiet, staring daggers at her, though the effect was severely diminished by his helmet.
"Now that is more like it, Mr. Cart,"
the provost said, her cigarette already gone. This project took a toll on her, that was sure.
"Then listen carefully now. Corres and her research teams have constructed a prototype they call a Janus device. I will spare you the details, and believe you me, Corres did not spare me any, and I had to endure her in my office for 11 hours in a row. But the gist of it is very simple. They believe that this device, when linked to a warp drive or one of your ships, should stabilize the antimatter field within the gate, or, in layman's terms, open it."
Within a second, Mr. Cart forgot about being angry. He forgot about Dowd and wanted posters of his fleet, circulated by Sindrian Diktat and Tritakian Corporation. Could this be it? Could he finally be close to achieving his own goal? He wordlessly urged the provost to continue.
I expected more excitement from you, but from what you have said, you use these gates often, so the novelty must have worn off to you some centuries ago. Regardless, that is the job I have for you, testing the Janus device. Now, we do not want to repeat Calico's mistake. Not only we don't want to disconnect our system from the rest of the sector, we also don't want to give Dowd any reason to execute us all. Which is why I want you to install this device on your flagship. It's easy, just connect it to your nav computer, then go outside of inhabited systems and try to use it on a gate out there to jump to another one, preferably also one placed in a system without human settlements. Then return here. Is this acceptable?
It is, Provost, but Why won't you just give the prototype to Dowd's people to test? That's what you promised them, didn't you?
No. I promised them use of this technology after it's properly developed, and testing is still part of development process. I understand this, you understand this, but hegemony jarheads may not, should something go wrong.
Or, in other words, if this thing backfires and blows someone up, it's better for it to be us than hegemony fleet, correct?
You are annoyingly straightforward,
Anahita said, lighting up another cigarette.
But yes, that is the gist of it. It is untested technology, and while I have trust in Kores's abilities, I don't want hegemony to witness eventual failure firsthand, especially if it will lead to dead spaces.
Well, thanks for your honesty, I guess. But on topic of honesty, what if it does work? What's stopping me or my fleet from taking this device and fleeing?
Nothing. Except, of course, for the fact that you, in all probabilities, have nowhere to go. Escape with the prototype and hegemony will chase you down, but even if you will use gates, we will have technology to supply them with more devices to chase you with. But keep working for me, and I will ensure Dowd that you were instrumental to the project. I will even tell him that you died a heroic death during our experiments, which should keep him off your back, at least for a while.
I see. Very well then, we're receiving the prototype right now. I'll set off for the nearest safe gate as soon as we're done here.
Then we are done here right now. Don't waste time,
Anahita said and cut off the connection. Mr. Cart waved his middle finger to the empty screen and then called Varuna, because they had some preparations to do. First thing was calling Callisto Ibrahim to ask her for a certain favor. It wasn't anything immediate, but she was happy to help, as repayment for bringing Hamatsu back to her. Then the company set off to purchase more fuel and supplies, just in case they needed them for the experiment, the boss said. And then he made something rather uncommon for him, and addressed the entire crew of Cart Logistics on a fleet-wide open channel, and told them openly what they were about to do. He told them how their work for Galatian Academy was about to culminate in them reactivating the gate network, or at the very least a singular pair of gates. But the reaction to this revelatory knowledge was muted. For most inhabitants of the sector, these old gates were nothing more but pointless relics from the past. Several generations lived and died with them laying dormant in the background. Besides, every now and then some visionary researcher, or a ludic fanatic, showed up, claiming that they had the secret key to unlocking the gates, and each and every one of these people failed. And the crews thought that this was pretty much the same kind of situation. Sure, the Academy itself might have been involved, but how could they succeed where so many others failed? That was the general thought. And Mr. Cass and his officers, in all truth, were skeptical as well. But the boss understood that what they had on board was a prototype. Even if it failed, it could provide the Academy with important data to make something better, something working. So, with all the preparations done, the company set course for Toga system, one they visited several times already in the past. There was a gate there, and no wonder old domain pioneers decided to build one, as the system had 2 habitable worlds. Granted, they were dust-dry deserts with very little vegetation or water, but planets where humans could breathe under open sky without life support were exceedingly rare, so someone, some centuries ago, decided that one day Toga system might receive its own share of settlers. The company was also there when they were scanning the gates a few months ago, and Mr. Cart chose this system because it was relatively close to the core, in case something went wrong, but still far enough away to not cause issues for inhabited systems. They arrived near the gate a few days later, and as Academy's prototype was being prepared and hooked up to their systems, the fleet performed a traditional dive and flew right through the looming, silent adamantine ring. As always, nothing happened, but spaces across the sector did it anyway. After all, who knew, maybe that was the day when one of them would get lucky. And with this little display of superstition out of the way, Count Logistics took positions around the gate, put all powers to the sensors, and awaited for the boss to power up the Janus device. It wouldn't work, everyone thought. It couldn't work. The gates were dead, and even here in space, even Galatian Academy didn't have the power to bring dead things back to life. But even as everyone thought that, all crew members, from top officers to lowest deck cleaners, went silent as Mr. Cart flipped the switch on his console. For a minute or two, nothing happened, and the tension among the crew started to become palpable. People stared at the screens, then at themselves, then at the screens again, but the gate was just as dead as it always was. "What a waste of time," Brother Jesselton muttered on Second Chance's bridge. "Lud was the last human worthy of travelling through the gates. We can't open them until we repent." But just as he finished saying it, something changed. The inside of the gate remained silent, but the ring around it started glowing with bizarre green-blue light, getting brighter and brighter with every second. A spinning vortex of bizarre energy appeared inside the gate, distorting the view. Everyone's eyes went wide with shock and awe. They could see the stars within the ring, but those were not the stars visible from this system. The gateway showed them a view of some other place. It worked. Brother Jesselton fell to his knees and praised Lud, and many, even not followers of the path, followed his example, singing praises, spellbound by this miracle unfolding right in front of their eyes, at least until Mr. Card's voice broke them out of their daze. "It's malfunctioning! Evasive maneuvers!" he shouted on fleet-wide comm. The response was complete and utter confusion. Malfunctioning? How could it malfunction if they could see it glowing with such brilliant light? How could it be wrong if it showed them distant stars, as if they were just on the other side? Mr. Cow didn't wait for them to respond, and put entire fleet under his manual control. He turned all ships around and burned as hard as possible away from the gate, a whining, pained noise that only he could hear filling his ears. It was like the song he heard earlier, only distorted and wrong in every imaginable way. His crews shouted some obscenities, demanding to return to witness the gates opening for the first time in over 2 centuries, but he kept flying away. And then the gate exploded. The ring around it was glowing so bright it overshadowed the system's sun, and kept getting brighter. And then, when it reached the critical mass, all that weird energy simply broke out, spreading in all directions like a shockwave. Elated shouts of the crew turned into cries of terror as they realized just how quickly this wave of searing energy approached them. They would not be able to escape. Alerts blared across the entire fleet as everyone ran to emergency positions, and then a shockwave reached them. For a brief moment, all everyone could see was blinding light, but a second later the shockwave has passed, and left behind it not elation and joy, but chaos and panic. System alerts blinked on every screen and consoles, showing critical damage across the fleet. Structurally, the ships were fine, but almost every system on board was fried. Communications between vessels was barely functioning, and in some rooms, as their occupants found out to their utter dread, oxygen has been sucked out. "We send! This is our punishment for walking into the domain of God!" Jesselton shouted on the general comm. Mr. Cart tried to stop him, but his own comms were fried, and he couldn't send Varuna to knock him out because the doors to their cabin were locked shut as well. "Brother, do you think Prophet Lud would lose his head like that?" Zala asked over the comm, deliberately calling Lud a man. Now it was not the time to give someone like Jesselton another crisis of faith. "No, brother. He would rally his flock and preach unto them to prove their worth, not condemn them all to death in darkness." It wasn't the best speech, but Zala knew her own comms could go out at any time. Still, it seemed it had its desired effect. Jesselton took a deep breath and stopped panicking, and moments later used his main fleet comm console to organize repair crews on every ship, at least until Mr. Cart fixed his own comms and took over. When the dust finally settled, and all the critical alerts were dealt with, everyone considered it a miracle that only few people across the entire fleet lost their lives. But that was just a side thought. The most important thing on everyone's head was a far simple one. It did not work. The Janus device did not work, and in fact almost got them killed. What's worse, as the fleet tried to leave the system, because even though they could perform some basic repairs themselves, they desperately needed a dock in a shipyard to replace all fried subsystems, they realized that what happened during old Provost Calico's experiment happened again. After the gate exploded, in a way no one could explain, all of the jump points within Toga systems were fried as well, and could not be used to jump into hyperspace. Fortunately, Mr. Cart had his transfer jumping trick up his sleeve, but that put even more strain on their ships, which then barely managed to limp back to nearest inhabited system, and barely made their way into dock, where the boss gave everyone 2 days off, as shipyard crews got to work on repairing the damage and replacing all of the burnout wiring. And while most of the shock dissipated over these 2 days, it did not change the fact that morale was at all-time low. They were so close, they could see the gate waking up from its centuries-old slumber, but instead of welcoming them, it almost killed everyone in the fleet. Maybe gates really meant to stay closed. Maybe they thought they were closed for a reason. But Mr. Cart stayed focused. Yes, the first attempt turned out to be a failure, but they survived, and he had no doubt that the device gathered plenty of data the Academy could use, and so, as soon as the company ships were repaired, he set a course for Galatia system to report their findings to the Provost. But Anahita Baird, as might be expected, was not even remotely pleased to hear it. She took one look at the data from the device and completely lost her nerve. For the next 5 minutes she screamed at Kores on an open channel, berating her for this failure. Mr. Cart tried to intervene, and only found himself in Baird's crosshair in response. On the screen, Scylla gave him a look of both sympathy and gratitude, but when it became clear that the Provost's rage would not end anytime soon, she finally decided to speak up.
Miss Baird, stop screaming for a moment, she said in a shaking voice, and this display of sudden defiance shocked Anahita so much she closed her mouth, breathing heavily. It did not work, yes, but it didn't work because we are not working at optimal capacity. I'm a theorist. I can design ideas all day long, but I require someone to bring my ideas into material form. You have all the engineers of Galatian Academy at your disposal, girl, Anahita snarled. What more do you want? For High Hegemon himself to hold a hammer for you? No, I need someone who can think outside of the box. Galatian engineers are brilliant, yes, but we are working with technology that we don't really understand here, and I need someone who, well, can operate outside of usual guidelines. What I'm trying to say is that I need my friend, I need Elisa Zal.
Anahita stared at Kores coldly for 5 full seconds, and then she turned to Mr. Cart.
Mercenary, you have your next contract. Find that Zal woman. Bring her here in chains if you need to. Scylla, if you know where she is, tell Mr. Cart now so he can bring her here and we can get this thing done. Well, yes, that is, you see, a bit of a problem, Scylla stammered. You see, last I heard, well, I know where Elisa Zal is. Problem is she's being held hostage by, Warlord Kanta.
Kanta? The pirate warlord Kanta? Mr. Cart asked with disbelief. The one that even hegemony navies are too afraid to chase?
Don't take you for a fan, but yes, that Kanta.
Provost, there are easier ways of getting us killed. He turned to Baird. This is just deranged.
This, Mr. Cart, is the only way, Anahita interjected coldly. If Kores thinks this Zal woman is necessary for the project, then your contract, is to extract her in any way possible. I do not care how you will do this. You need to bribe her, call me, and I'll authorize what's left of our budget. Or kill Kanta, or break into her station, or send your assassin friend to kidnap her. I only care that you bring this Zal woman here as quickly as possible. We are on the verge of ending this star-forsaken dark age we were in for over 2 centuries. I will not accept any excuses. The sector will not accept any excuses.
But Mr. Cart started, but Anahita cut him off.
But nothing. I am giving you this job because I know you are a resourceful man. Don't do yourself or me a disservice by claiming otherwise. From what I know, you have a reputation in the underground. Use it. Maybe that way you will get the audience. Or join Kanta's raiders. As I said, I don't care. Now get to it and don't come back without Elisa Zal. Bear out.
She cut the connection and did not respond to further calls. Mr. Cart took a look at his officers, who gathered in his cabin, and wondered if they'd still be alive after this attempt at stealing someone from Kanta's den.
I could try and sneak into the station, as the old witch said,
Varuna proposed. With her newly missing teeth, she could certainly look more like a pirate than she did before.
Thing is, even if I do, finding a single person that is probably hidden away somewhere may take months. I make one mistake there and I'm dead, and Zal will probably be dead too.
We could hire some mercenaries and storm the station, Disco said. It's going to be a bloodbath, but with, say, 1,000 troopers, it should take just a few days. Granted, out of the 1,000, maybe 100 will get out alive. Fighting in a space station is never pretty. Mr. Cart nodded. He didn't like any of these ideas, and he somehow didn't think Kanta would be a cheap person to bribe. Still, they had to do something, but as he was about to ask Varuna to sneak in, Captain House coughed and stepped forward.
"Maybe there is no need for battle or sneaking, Captain," he said. I think I can get us an audience with Kanta. You know, on account of me working for her before."
"Weren't you on the run from her this entire time?" the boss asked.
"Well, kinda. But I'm pretty sure Kanta gave her people orders to bring me back alive. She's a vicious bitch, no doubt about that, but she has a rule. She doesn't allow anyone to hurt her family. My grandmother may be a menace to entire sector, but at least to her own, she tries to be alright."
The silence that followed his statement was deafening, as all face turned wide-eyed to the old pirate. Varuna was the first one to shake it off.
"Excuse me, you're what?"